Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jarman and I'm going to be doing a beginner's watercolour tutorial with you today. We're going to be painting a grate tipped with watercolours. I'm just going to go through the materials you're going to need to do this workshop. So I know that you've all got a similar palette to this one. It's in a metal tin and I'm going to be using the tin lid to mix the colours on like a mixing palette. I know that you've all been given something like this from the art group, which is fantastic. It's going to enable you all to take part. You will also need some masking tape to tape your watercolour paper to a board or a piece of cardboard or something like that, just to secure it in place. It helps to prevent the paper from buckling when we apply the water. You'll need some kitchen paper towel just to blot the water off your brush. You'll also need 2 pots of water, 1 smaller pot with clean water for mixing colours, and a larger pot just to wash your brush in. You'll need 2 brushes. I think you've been given 1 larger and 1 smaller. It doesn't matter particularly what size they are. I've got a 10 round and a 6 round, and I'll be using just those 2 brushes to complete this painting. You'll also need a pencil of some kind with a point, so make sure it's sharpened nicely. And I have a graphite stick that I'll be using to help me transfer my image onto the watercolour paper. If you don't have a graphite stick, that's fine. You can just go ahead and use your pencil. I'll show you that technique in a second. And I will be using Daler & Rowney's cold pressed aquafine paper. It's got a slight texture on it, and it's a 300 gram. That's really important. You want this at least 300 grams in weight. Again, it helps to prevent the paper from cockling, from getting these peaks and troughs where the water collects and creates effects that you don't really want. So at least 300 grams in weight is what you want. And I've also got a board to stick my paper to. You should have also received the image that we're going to use as reference for today's painting, and it's a beautiful grate tip, lots of lovely colours on there for us to mix up. So let's get started. Okay, so we have all our materials ready, and we can make a start. So you can probably see on my watercolour paper here that I have already transferred my reference image onto it, and the way I did that was, first of all, I turned over my reference picture and I used my graphite stick to scribble all over the back of that image. Like I said before, if you haven't got a graphite stick, then a pencil will do. If it's a soft pencil, like a 6B or a 3B, that would be better because it'll be easier for you to transfer the graphite across. If it's a HB, it'll still work as well. You can still scribble and leave graphite on the surface of the paper, that's fine. It will just take you a little bit longer to do that. So I used my graphite stick just to make things a bit easier for me, and then I turned over my reference image, and first of all I stuck down the watercolour paper to my board securely at all 4 sides. It's going to hold it in place and make things easier for us when we're painting. So make sure you do that first, and once you have that secured, you can take a little bit of your masking tape and place your image over the top of your paper and stick it down into position, ready for you to trace through. Now, just to let you know, I didn't trace mine square on like this. I actually really wanted to do mine at a slight angle, so I tilted him a little bit. So the branches are going slightly more at an angle, and his tail is definitely pointing down the left hand side here. So what I did was I just tilted the picture to about this angle and secured it with some tape, and then with a sharp pencil I went around all the outside edges of my bird to begin with, and the outside of the branch. Then I looked at the beak and the eye and the feet, made sure they were in position. All the time you can check by lifting up your sheet and make sure that it's transferring correctly. And then I looked at the details, so I came on his back, across his back here, and traced around all those dark shapes and stripes. I did simplify it a little bit in this area because there are so many fine lines, the lighter lines and darker lines, that can be a bit too complicated to paint. So I simplified that a little bit. But after having done that, you can remove your reference image from your paper, and you should have a nice, crisp, clear picture to follow as we begin our painting. Okay, so remember we have two brushes to hand. I'm going to take the larger brush now, my clean brush, and I'm going to dip it into the clean water just a little bit, and I'm going to wet the head. What I want to do is I want to wet the whole of the head except the eye and the beak. So I'm starting off at the top of his head here, and I'm really carefully pulling that water across, painting it on like I would do if it was actually, if I was going to apply the paint. So nice and careful around those shapes. So I've left his eye and I've left his beak. If you notice, this shape here is white, so I'm also going to leave that shape as well, and so I'm wetting around that, and I'm going to bring the water all the way down just this little triangular shape that goes down the front of his breast there. So I've applied the water to the whole of that area, and if you angle your head, you'll be able to see if you've missed anything out. You'll be able to see if you have any puddles. You don't want puddles on your paper. Now that's wet, I'm going to pop my brush, my thinner brush, into the black, and I'm going to just dip my tip of the brush into that wet area on the paper. Okay. And just allow that to just move into that area nicely, and move that paint around the surface, allowing it to fill the shape that you've just wet. Okay, bringing it now underneath here carefully. I might just add a little bit more paint, so I'm popping it down. And this is actually where we start to see that blue colour. So I'm going to change colours now. Just bringing that dark just up here and across his beak. Just a spot more up here. And then I'm going to move into that blue colour. Okay, so we don't want to take too much time. It is drying. I'm cleaning off my brush and I'm dipping it into the lovely Prussian blue that we mixed, and I'm dabbing it in. It's already dried, so let me just get some clean water and just re-wet this area. We don't want it, oh, that's a little bit too much water. Don't want this area to dry because we don't want hard lines, so just wetting that area a little bit more. Drag some of that off as well. Under the lights, this it dries my paper quite quickly. So there we go, I've re-wet that area. Hopefully you won't have that problem because you won't have light streaming down. Unfortunately, I've not got a very bright room in here, so I've got a lot of lights trying to show you the detail, and it obviously the heat from those dries the paper quite quickly. So I'm just dotting this blue onto the surface, and I'm going to allow it to touch up to the grey. And down the side here, I actually want to bring some of this blue down the side of that shape and into, like I say, into the top of the grey here. And make sure you get to the edge of your shape you've painted. And there we go. So we've got that blue down nicely, and while it's still slightly damp, I'm just going to clean off my brush take off the excess water. I just want to create a few little flicks of feathers off his chest, so just drag that paint out in a few flicks, and also we want to drag it up into the white patch on his cheek to create those little hairs. Actually, what we're doing here is negative painting just to create the shapes of those white hairs as they were coming down and overlapping this black section. So move into the blue and do the same thing. So dragging a few little flicks to suggest those feathers. And a little bit at the top here. Just going to bring in some of that black just across here. And a little bit more just around his eye. While the paint's still wet, so we can darken that area a little bit. And I'm going to allow this to start to dry and put a few blooms in there in a second.